Welcome to Vandalia TV. I'm your host, Nate Cesco. Today, I am talking to a guest I've wanted to do this for ever since I started Vandalia TV. I consider you to be a young upstart whiz kid who just makes amazing work. My guest today is Kadin Tooley. But let's pull back a little bit. Kadin, tell us who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Kadin Tooley. I'm a West Virginia native. Been making, really just telling stories, right? And making work digitally and visually for about 6 years now.
Mm-hmm. Let's let the audience associate who you are a little bit. Tell them about some of the recent projects that you have worked on that they've probably seen floating around on the internet.
Totally. So I just wrapped a film and premiered it called Exodus 2320. I've worked on a anthology series with you and Afshin Masagi, Normal for Now. And then a number of various short films and music videos. Worked closely with Render the Hearts band locally and things like that. So I've been involved in a lot of different projects and a lot of different roles.
In a very short period of time, you know, I think one thing that's really interesting about watching you is, like, you were in college, but you weren't one of those people who, like, ducked down into college and did their college, like, homework. It was like, no, I'm going to go out and experiment and do a whole bunch of art locally. I think notably Shalem, too. You did a lot of the Shalem music videos that were, like, absolutely amazing. Like, literally, I've been in situations where I've been showing people on my phone his music videos and like, how did that happen? Not to gush over you too much, but that's the foundation of your work, right? Is like every time you show something that Kadin Tooley has done, people are just amazed at the quality of work. So
dude, thank you.
Let's pull back a little further and talk about, you know, you getting into film and media in general. I don't know what your interest or your trajectory exactly is, but I'm really excited to hear what you want to be doing and how you got into it.
Yeah. So, you know, we were talking a little bit even before this started, like, and I say for somebody who doesn't really know what they want to do, I'm good at doing what I want to do. And I mean that by, like, I just, I'm drawn to, you know, different things, both in the way that they're told and the way that they're shot, especially. So I mean that as in, you know, I watch movies and I don't really care about the story. I know that might be kind of like a taboo thing to say, but I'll watch things and I'll kind of break them down just for the way that they look visually and the way that they're shot and their aesthetic. So, you know, I'm drawn to things that interest me and things that I was jealous that I wasn't a part of. You know, so like the movie Joker, for example, it's like, regardless of your opinion on the movie, like, it is so beautiful.
It is undeniably a beautiful movie, and that's one thing you can pull from it. Yeah.
So it's like, you know, in the middle of class, I was like, it wouldn't get out of my head, so I literally just had to leave class and go see it alone. Like, so it's that kind of thing where it's like I'm drawn to things like that and pieces of work like that. So I would say where my interest lies, things that interest me. I know that's a really dumb way of saying it.
I don't want to put you too limited into a box. I would consider you a cinematographer first and foremost. Is that a label other people put on you, or is that something you like? That's what I think I am.
Totally. I would say both for sure. I definitely would introduce myself, especially in the world of film, as a cinematographer first, but have obviously, in the nature of low-budget filmmaking, have had a lot of different roles.
You have to wear a lot of hats. Normally, whenever it's a small crew, you got to wear a lot of hats. You helped set up some lights here, I'm pretty sure, whenever we did this. But I'll let you, because you know what you're doing more than I am. So let's start a little earlier, too. Let's talk about your first interest into film, getting into, like, oh, this is something I maybe want to do.
Yeah, you asked me that, and I didn't answer it.
No, you're good. I'm following up. That's how we do it.
Yeah.
That's the art I know.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that I got into just storytelling because my dad and my mom were, like, inherent storytellers in themselves. Like, my dad is a pastor, so that's part of the work, right? But also they toured, and you know, I went with them when I was younger, and they did drama. So they did essentially what were theater performances that, like, told a story, and they would tell them to audiences. So I was growing up in that realm all the time, and my dad is as much as or even more of a movie buff than I am, and has a way bigger movie collection than I do. So I think my love of you know, filmmaking and storytelling is totally because of them, for sure. So, you know, I was introduced to movies way earlier than even some of my friends were. And
in the context of watching it as art, I assume, right?
Exactly, or appreciating it for what it is, even if it was like Spider-Man or something like that. Like, just appreciating it, and even, you know, my dad collecting it as a physical piece of media, like something tangible. I think I have more of an appreciation for the art because of that, because it was something that was, like, cherished and put on a shelf and
Yeah, this isn't a passive thing you do on a weekend occasionally. It's like, no, we can be into film.
Exactly. And, my family would do it together, so it was part of, like, us as a family as well. So
whenever you were first starting to experiment with making stuff, what did that look like? What was the first little Kadin Tooley projects whenever, I'm assuming middle school, maybe?
Yeah, totally middle school. You got it. It was a flip video camera, right? The one that flip out with the USB.
Yeah.
So I would do that, and really before that, my dad had an 8mm, 8mm tape, so digital tape camera, and I would shoot when he would hand it to me, so I would, like, not know what I was doing and just look around. But when I actually wanted to start making things, I would do it with that flip camera. So we would reenact movie scenes, and we would, like, there was no editing, like, so we would literally shoot the shots that we wanted to with that flip camera. And I still have all those, which is really interesting. But that's what I would say my first camera and my first, like, attempt at making anything with a camera.
I've been watching a lot of movies. I think I could do something like that.
Yeah.
Let's start. Yeah. And then you've transitioned that into just years and years of putting in a lot of work and learning. And I think that's like one of the things is, I heard about you very early on in, like, the Huntington film scene, and I think saw a couple things that you had put out. I can't remember specific projects to draw, but I just remember there was a qualitative leap every time I heard your name attached to something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's fair to say. It definitely seemed like, one, there was experimentation that you were doing, and then also, two, that, like, you were trying to not one up, but level up a project every time. Yeah. Is that something that you're proactively doing every time you approach a new project?
Yeah, so like I said a little bit earlier, like, I do a lot of work with other people collaboratively, but a lot of the things that I make that are, like, branded as, like, directed by, like, I don't say I'm a director, but, like, any project that I spearhead, like, I do want it to one up it, the previous one, in a way that, like, the very first thing that I even remotely called a film was called the Filmmaker, and it was totally like a film school, like, meta.
That's right. No, that was you, right? It was the Filmmaker, and he's filming the young boy.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like he's filming the young boy.
Yeah.
But no, that's a great short. I think it's on Vandalia TV, maybe.
Yeah.
If not, I'll put it on there before this interview goes live. No, I remember seeing that, and again, it was just, that was was it for a film sprint?
Yeah, well, it was actually for the film festival at Marshall. So the student short film festival, I worked with a writer named Josh Knight, and he was at Marshall at the time. I was still in high school, and, like, we just literally shot it, like, one day and edited it and had it ready, and it got accepted, and that, like, blew my mind that something like that could even happen, because it was conceived, like, essentially 2 days before, right?
Yeah.
So it was literally about a little kid who was my brother at the time, like, wanting to make movies and making it, and, like, how your imagination kind of comes to life, and how that kind of exist in a separate world than normal life, right?
Yeah, and you can tell in it that you're doing a lot of not necessarily experimentation, but you're being very deliberate in how you're shooting it and how it's, like, edited and all those things. Like, whenever I first started off, I was making sketches, and it was like we managed to point the camera in the direction of when people were talking, and it was that for several years.
Yeah.
But whenever you see somebody making very deliberate artistic choices very early on, you know that they're, like, exploring something that they think is really valuable and really exciting. You talked about working with another writer at that point in time. One thing I think is really interesting, too, about, like, what I would consider your, like, generation or wave of Huntington creatives is there is, like, a group of you that you're all collaborating, and you've mentioned collaboration as being a very important part of this for you. Talk a little bit about what people would consider the scene now of Huntington filmmaking and your role within that.
Yeah, I'm not totally versed in it all, right? Because there's so much happening, and, like, stuff where it's like you really just can't have a pulse on everything. But I would say that a lot of people are, especially like Dylan Smith, people like Dylan Smith and Jason Morgan, and people that I've worked with closely are very passionate about, like, getting people that are right for the job and good for the job and getting them to work, and, like, just getting people to work and working with people. And I'm the same way. Like, all of my projects is like, do I need somebody to hold this light? Not really, because there's a piece of metal that can do it. But, like, I'd rather have somebody there that could put an input into anything, just be like, hey, maybe we should try this. And I think that just strengthens the project. So I would say people like Dylan and Jason and you especially, like, are always have a mind of that, of, like, how can I strengthen this project by working with someone else?
Yeah, and I think the availability of people has definitely expanded a lot.
For sure.
Everybody, one, is totally cool with jumping in on each other's projects, but then says like, but I have my thing now. Will you all come and help?
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, yeah, of course. You did all this for
Jump
me.
on
Yeah.
it.
So it's like, I think that the level of collaboration that is happening now is unprecedented, I think, in West Virginia, and two, in Huntington. So whenever you're looking at what you want to do next, you're fresh out of college. You've already have pretty much a feature under your belt, two. If we want to count Exodus, I don't know how you exactly label it, right? You DP'd Wake Up Dorothy, which is coming out, and then you spearheaded the production of Exodus 2320.
Yeah.
Those are two really large projects to get under your belt before you're a college grad, you know? So now you're out in the world and you can literally have whatever you want to go for. What are you thinking you're going to go for next?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, because it's like I always want to jump on opportunity, like in all facets, at all levels, right? Like, so if an opportunity arises for me to become a part of a project, I'm going to try it unless I just can't, you know? And so I would say that I would love to DP like a true feature and just be in the role of DP, because I did with Dorothy, but and the same with Exodus. Like I shot both of those films, but I had a lot of my role kind of blurred between it. So I was like dipping into producer and that kind of thing. But I would love to really just be minded in the role of cinematographer for a project. And it looks like that's actually happening. At least in the next few months, that's going to be able to be the case. So I'm super excited about that. One of my goals is to actually shoot a project on film, because, you know, I've shot digitally my whole life. So I want to kind of expand and get that kind of skill set under my belt if I can. And and after that, I'm not too sure.
Talk to me more about that specifically too, because I'm always curious where, you know, I think it's a generational thing, right? Where we just grew up having digital cameras and DSLRs kind of thrown at us, or maybe we had one in the house and it was easy to pick up. Beforehand, it was really hard to get together and make a movie that looked like a movie. Yeah. Now we can kind of do that. So where do you think it's that early appreciation for film that makes you want to shoot something on film? Or like, what is it that makes you like curious about doing that?
Yeah. Essentially everything except for Exodus that I've had a hand in has had some sort of filmic quality. And I don't know if that's because I'm drawn to it or that's like the indie aesthetic. I don't know yet. But like the Filmmaker, like almost half of that film was faked Super 8. Right, like, and I did a short called Mon Mott, which was literally supposed to look like 35 millimeter film from the 20s, 30s, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's like that's kind of trailed with me, this like filmic aesthetic. So I'm like, why am I faking it? Like, you know, is it because I'm broke? Like potentially, right? Because it's expensive now, but you know, I just, especially because it's way easier to expose digitally. So it's almost like I've lost, or at least not had a part in, learning a whole section of lighting for movie making, because I haven't been able to shoot anything truly on film. I've shot Super 8 for Joey Andromeda. He did a project on Super 8, and that was awesome, but like I just want to expand that skill set, because it's really about lighting, right? And it's a whole different mindset.
Yeah. I mean, I always think about the accessibility of making films now, and it's wild that we all can get some version of like, oh, this is how they make big production things, and that was like never there before.
You talked about just like filmmaking, how it has become more accessible in Huntington. Do you think it's because filmmaking equipment has become cheaper and more accessible, or do you think it's because of like Marshall and their film program, or why do you think like suddenly, at least for me, it feels like suddenly, even over the course of the 4 years I was at Marshall?
I think generationally it is just going to trend that way, right? Like technology becomes more ubiquitous. So I think across the board, not just looking at like the vacuum of Marshall, more people are probably trying to make film now more than ever. But then too, you start to develop these scenes. Once somebody is like, I'm doing this thing, and then somebody else realizes that it's accessible, if that makes sense. Because, I mean, growing up here, there wasn't a film scene that I was at least a part of or was big enough for me to like integrate into. Yeah. So it always seemed like other, and I was always like, oh, people in West Virginia don't make film. Yeah. Or maybe one guy did. But then once it's like, oh, a handful of people are doing it. Oh, my God, I can do this too. And I think that that's a lot of people who are making stuff now. It's like, yeah, I know a guy who can shoot something that looks really great, and I know a good editor, and this person really wants to act, and they can. Yeah. So it literally just is scene development.
Yeah, that's so true.
You were talking a little bit before we got started about dedicating time every day to inspiration. Can you talk a little bit about, one, that process, and then two, what you get out of it?
Yeah, like watching movies, right? That's super important. A lot of cinematographers will like disavow that for some reason. Like they'll say like, I looked at painting for inspiration, or I looked at photography for inspiration. All those are valid, and I'll do those. I'll look at those, but like we're trying to make a movie, right? So you got to see what other people are making and how they've made it. So I definitely watching movies and staying up to date and like the tech that's being used, and especially like some of the techniques that are being used in the industry. So I'll do that. I'll watch films, or at least read about films, and then also just be versed in. We were talking about American Cinematographer, the magazine. Just being versed in industry technique, I think, is something that I'm really interested in, and just seeing what's possible and what people are achieving and figuring out. So that's part of it, and then, I just hope to get awareness. Right, we're in West Virginia. Like nobody's making studio features in West Virginia, at least right now. So just being aware of what's happening and potentially how you can take a step up and meet that, or at least be aware of things and techniques. So
I think what was really interesting is how deliberate you were talking about being about it, because, I think we all have our muses, or we go on a binge now at some point and we're like, this is the thing I'm absolutely in love with. And I think, at least I know for a lot of writers or a lot of other creatives, it's like, oh, I did that, and then now I'm kind of just like focused on working. But like, I think people lose sight of how valuable it is for the practice to just stop and be like, what are we all doing? Yeah. And then getting back into it. Is that something that you're thinking about too, of like, are you fielding inspiration for a general mindset, or are you fielding inspiration for like, I need to solve a problem or something like that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I hear you. Like, I would say a general mindset, especially just approaching like true set-based filmmaking, right? When you have multiple people doing different jobs. Like, for me, like, I was taught at Marshall how to make something and fill each role in the most efficient way possible. But we didn't delve really deep into what each of those jobs mean, in the sense that one other person would be doing them on a set, and you potentially are the head of those people doing them. Talked a little bit about it, but we didn't really explore it. So having an awareness of that and being, I'll use the term literate, being literate in what each of those jobs means and what the person doing them is responsible for, because I'm not in film school. I didn't go to film school. So like that has really been a goal of mine, is to like just know what I'm talking about if I show up and somebody's like, what the heck are you doing, or what do I need to do? Because I've had to kind of spearhead a lot of different projects. So I need to feel like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult, especially with, working with people who maybe aren't as experienced, or people that have no idea what they're doing. I think it could be even more successful sometimes, because they're just hungry to do something, right? And you just need to know how to point them in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've mentioned a couple times your experience with Marshall University because you attended there, and also the production program is newer and growing at a ridiculous rate. Can you talk about your experience, learning at Marshall specifically?
Yeah, I had never touched what's called a nonlinear editor. Like, I've never touched an editing software before Marshall at all. So, they really, really like helped me, and with a lot of my own like willingness to just jump in. Learned how to edit, learned how to really tell a story visually. I was a photography minor, so I took photo classes alongside of video ones. So we were shooting film photography, so 35 millimeter, like black and white photography, at the same time that I was learning digital filmmaking. So I think a lot of that really helped. So learning, about film and developing film and then shooting digitally, I got a little bit of a knowledge base on both of those. So Marshall really, really helped me there. And it also, like, the reasons I do not regret at all going to Marshall is like the connections that I made with just artists in general in this area. Because I wouldn't be making or have made anything that I did without the people that I met at Marshall. So if anybody's on the teeter-totter, I guess, of whether or not to go, I would say go, because of the people you'll meet.
I mean, that's in Appalachia, again, it's not an area that's necessarily associated with film, and we're talking about how it seems like now there are some people coming up that are really, really interested in pursuing film, not only out like leaving Appalachia and doing it and being from here, but also just within the region. Do you think about that in your own like career trajectory too? Is it like, because you can easily get caught up in the the trope of it, right? Of
Yeah.
just being like, I've only tell Appalachian stories and I want to make Appalachian documentaries and it's all this. And then there's also the other, camp, which is I want to be here and I want to tell whatever stories I want to be. But it all funnels down to being an Appalachian creative in an area that's not associated with film.
Yeah.
How do you think about that in your own perspective?
I didn't really consider myself Appalachian until I got to college. Partly because I just really didn't care until I got to college and really figured out what it meant to be an Appalachian storyteller and actually hearing Appalachian stories. So I would never shy away from saying that I'm not an Appalachian and I'm not a filmmaker from Appalachia, but I would say that I don't want to be defined by telling Appalachian stories. Because I honestly, this is a personal opinion. I don't think it's very fair for somebody who grew up in the area that works now in the industry that wants to come back and getting a lot of hate from the area saying that you can't tell a story because you're from LA, or you can't tell an Appalachian story because you're not living here. I don't think that's very valid. I think like even somebody that necessarily didn't grow up from West Virginia can tell a West Virginian story. I'm an outlier, I think, in that.
No, I think that's a totally fair assessment of the situation. I think it's a protected area because the people have done hatchet jobs with it, and I think that's what sways people that way. But then it's also like your hope is anybody telling a story is going to tell a considerate story. Yeah, I think that's the only thing that people really ultimately want. But I understand that comes out very viscerally sometimes when it's like, don't talk about us like that.
Yeah, it's like if large budget like studio movies were being made in West Virginia, then we would get a lot of diverse, potentially big budget movies made with an Appalachian perspective. But like there's no studios in Appalachia, at least in West Virginia, funding large budget feature films. So it's like at least stories are getting told. That's kind of my thinking of it. At least there are Appalachian stories getting told at a large budget level.
Yeah. So to the degree that you are now, the work you've done, are you only pursuing certain types of projects that meet a certain type of criteria? Is it only going to be, I want to make features now and I'm just going to try for the next 10 years to just hard make features? Or is it, here's a 2-minute thing I put together? Like what's your hope for your work? Man,
anything, right? And like I just want to work with people that value the people they're working with. I think that's really important. And one of my like goals on Exodus was like I got to like give people what they're worth, at the end of this project, whether that's pay, whether that's credit, whatever, like, people need to feel valued. And as long as people are on that same level of thinking, I'm here to do anything, absolutely anything. Be it music video, 2-minute things, feature. I just want to be able to work behind a camera as many times or as much as I can. So.
Yeah. Now that you're a little bit away from Exodus, like as far as production-wise, right? I mean, you've shot, you've edited, it's screened places. What are some of your thoughts now swirling about approaching a project that size and being sort of, you're putting your name on it? Yeah. Do you have any like ethos that you're developing now as far as like informed by your work that you've done there?
So I was a director, cinematographer, and producer on Exodus. I'll never do it all again. It's very difficult to jump those jobs. I think I would spearhead and direct a project and shoot it again, but it was a lot of effort to put in, and I like even with the amazing help that I had, it was still just a lot to come out and make happen by a certain time. So I would say it will be a while before I personally spearhead a project that large, but I would say that I'm here to shoot a feature again for sure. I just need to have, I would say, just the constraint of cinematographer and working within that role, I think, is what I'm interested in.
In the immediate, looking at the next year or so, I think everybody's life, you managed to make a feature functionally in a pandemic, but looking at your next few projects, even if you don't want to mention specifics on what you're doing, or you feel free to. Yeah. But what are you looking at as far as your body of work within the next year or so? Yeah. So
was super lucky to be a part of a live stream concert series called Jewel City Sessions that's being made right here in Huntington. I had the ability to work as a camera operator and a switcher on season 2. Season 3 is coming up in March. A lot of really cool, like, talented bands are working there. There's a individual by the name of James Hawley. He's a director. He is directing a feature film coming up at the end of this month. So we're right on the cusp of it happening, called The Good Fight. It's a feature film, boxing film. So I'll be working as DP on that. And then a couple projects in the works with Shalem, couple projects in the work with Render the Hearts. So it's just a lot of things happening. It's cool to see like these kind of large projects being placed in a schedule, and then a lot of stuff filling in the gaps of just people working. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, at this point now, I don't know where you can watch Exodus 2320. Maybe it's being festivaled, depending on when you're watching this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's available for rent on Vimeo on demand.
Yeah.
Maybe you just got done watching this on a live stream.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. Exodus 2023 is amazing. I know that people are going to look forward to whenever they can watch Wake Up Dorothy and everything else that you are putting out. Kadin, if you want to end on a message, a plug, anything, I want to give you space to say whatever you want about West Virginia filmmaking. Ice cream, I don't care. I just want the final word from you.
Okay, cool. I would just say that, like, stay hungry, right? And maybe that applies to ice cream. I don't know. But stay hungry in what you want to do, because even more so now than when I was graduating high school, if you have a dream job, it's possible in West Virginia. Don't let anybody tell you it's not.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kadin. Thank you all for watching. If you want to go check out VandaliaTV.com, even if it's any project of Kadin's, there's a handful of them on there. We'd really love for you to go watch. Thank you all. Thank you, Kadin. We will talk soon.